Chosen one, do not scroll past this. Something inside you stopped the moment this title appeared on your screen, and that stillness was not an accident. Listen carefully, because what you are about to hear was written for one person only: you. There is a reason you are hearing this today, not yesterday when you were too distracted to receive it, not tomorrow when the moment will have passed. Today, right now, while your heart is quiet enough to actually listen. This is not random. You may have noticed that your existence has always felt like it carries weight, not loud weight, not the kind that announces itself with applause or attention, a quiet weight, the kind that makes people remember you long after they have forgotten everyone else in the room. That was never an accident either. Nothing about your life has been accidental. Not the timing of your birth, not the family you were placed into, even the ones that were hard to love. Not the years that felt like wasted time, but were secretly building something in you no comfortable life ever could. Every single detail was placed with precision. You were not thrown into this world. You were positioned. Type yes, if this speaks to your spirit. Think about how many times you have felt like the exception to every rule you were ever taught. Other people seem to move through life on a straight, simple path. Yours has twisted, doubled back, collapsed, and rebuilt itself more times than you can count. You used to think that meant something was wrong with you. It did not. It meant your path was never meant to look like anyone else's. Some souls are not built to follow the pattern. Some souls are built to become the pattern others will one day follow. You were never ordinary. Even in your quietest, most invisible seasons, there was something about you that refused to fully disappear. People forgot conversations, forgot faces, forgot most of what passed through their lives in a single week. But they remembered you. They could not always explain why. Some presence does not need to be loud to be unforgettable. Yours never did. Even in your hardest moments, when you were certain you were being overlooked, something was quietly taking note of everything you endured. Every night you cried without anyone seeing. Every time you forgave someone who never apologized. Every time you kept showing up for people who would not have shown up for you. None of that went unnoticed. None of it was wasted. It was being recorded in a place far more permanent than memory. Comment Amen if you feel chosen. Here is something that will sit with you long after this video ends. Some people live their entire lives inside the boundaries that already exist. They follow the paths already carved by everyone before them. But every so often, a life appears that does not fit neatly into what came before it. A life so specific, so unusual, so precisely assembled that it requires new understanding just to make sense of it. If your life has ever felt like it needed its own explanation, like the old rules never quite applied to you, that feeling was not confusion. That feeling was recognition. You were built outside the pattern because you were never meant to live inside it. Think about every time you tried to force yourself into a box that was clearly too small. The job that drained you, but everyone said was smart. The relationship that quieted you, but everyone said was safe. The version of you that shrank just to keep the peace. None of it fit, did it? No matter how hard you tried, something inside you kept resisting. That resistance was not stubbornness. That resistance was your spirit refusing to accept a life smaller than the one you were designed to carry. Type 777 if you trust God's timing. You have felt isolated. Do not deny it. There have been rooms full of people where you still felt completely alone, as if you were speaking a language only you understood. There have been relationships where you gave everything and still felt unseen. That isolation was painful, and it deserves to be acknowledged rather than minimized. But consider this. Isolation is often the quiet space cleared around someone who is being prepared for something the crowd is not yet ready to witness. You were not being punished with distance. You were being protected by it. Spiritual sensitivity is not a weakness, even though the world has often treated it like one. You feel what others miss. You sense shifts in energy before anyone speaks a word. You carry emotional weight that was never yours to carry, simply because you cannot help but absorb what is around you. That has exhausted you more times than you can count. But that exhaustion is proof of a gift most people will never understand, because most people were never built to feel that deeply in the first place. Even your pain has not been wasted. Every wound you carried in silence, every betrayal that reshaped how you trust, every version of yourself that had to die so a stronger version could rise. All of it was transformation, not destruction. Pain that breaks a person completely does not usually leave room for reflection afterward, but pain that refines a person always does. If you can look back at what you survived and still recognize wisdom growing out of it, that is not coincidence. That is purpose working quietly beneath the surface. Type 1111 to affirm this message. Think back to the seasons of silence. The ones where your prayers seemed to hit the ceiling and go no further. The ones where you kept asking for a sign and none seemed to come. Silence is one of the hardest things a person can walk through because the absence of an answer often feels indistinguishable from the absence of care. But silence is not absence. Sometimes the most important work happens in the quiet, unwitnessed places, long before any answer is spoken aloud. You were not being ignored during those seasons. You were being formed by them. Consider the storms you were certain would end you, the diagnosis that frightened you, the relationship that collapsed and took your sense of self down with it. The financial season so tight, you were not sure how you would make it through the month, let alone the year. You made it through, every single one. And here is what most people never stop to notice. You did not just survive those storms, you came out of them with something you did not have going in. Depth, discernment, a kind of quiet strength that only comes from having nothing left to hold on to except faith itself. This is your confirmation. If you have felt an unexplainable pull lately, a sense that something in your life is shifting even though nothing on the outside looks different yet, that feeling is real. Alignment often begins invisibly. The soul senses movement long before circumstances catch up. You are not imagining it. You are simply early to notice what has already begun. Like this video if you feel this confirmation. Listen carefully, because this part matters most. You do not need permission to take up space in this world. You do not need to shrink your voice to make others comfortable. You do not need to apologize for the depth you carry, the intensity you feel, or the standards you refuse to compromise. The very things people have tried to correct about you may be the exact things you were never meant to change. Sometimes what looks like a flaw to a world built on average is actually a signature belonging to something extraordinary. Think about the doors that closed on you without warning, the friendships that ended without explanation, the plans that collapsed right when you thought they were finally coming together. At the time it felt like loss with no purpose. But look again. Every closed door removed something that would have delayed you. Every ending cleared space for something your old life could not have held. What felt like rejection was quietly redirection, moving you toward a version of your story that required room you did not yet have. There is a particular kind of grief that comes from being misunderstood by people who were supposed to know you best. Family who couldn't see past the surface. Friends who mistook your depth for distance. People who loved a version of you that was easier to explain and quietly resented the parts of you that weren't. That grief is real. It deserves to be honored, not dismissed. But hear this, being misunderstood by people who were never meant to carry your next season is not rejection of who you are. It is simply proof that your season is changing, and not everyone was invited into the next one. Type 222 If you are ready for breakthrough, you are allowed to feel tired, spiritually tired, emotionally worn from carrying so much for so long without anyone fully seeing the weight of it. That tiredness is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that you have been strong for longer than most people could manage. Rest does not disqualify you from your purpose. Rest prepares you to carry it further. There is something happening in the unseen places of your life right now that has not yet become visible. Growth almost always begins underground, in the dark, long before anything breaks through the surface. If you feel like nothing is changing, that does not mean nothing is happening. Roots are being formed. Foundations are being laid. What is invisible today is often the very thing holding up everything you will build tomorrow. Think about how specific your story is. Not general, not generic. Specific. The exact combination of pain, timing, personality, and resilience that makes up your life could not be duplicated by anyone else, no matter how hard they tried. That specificity is not a small detail, it is the entire point. A life this particular was not thrown together carelessly. It was composed with intention, the same way every meaningful thing in this world requires intention to exist at all. Comment Amen one more time if you believe this was meant for you. You may have spent years feeling like you did not belong anywhere completely, not fully at home in one world, not fully accepted in another, caught somewhere in between, too much for some spaces and not enough for others. That in-between feeling was never a flaw in your identity. It was evidence that you were never meant to be confined to a single lane. Some people are built to belong everywhere and nowhere at once because their purpose requires movement, not permanence. Think about the version of you that existed 5 years ago. Look at how much has already changed, quietly, without fanfare, simply through the act of surviving one difficult day after another. You have released people you once thought you could not live without. You have let go of dreams that no longer fit who you have become. You have built a kind of resilience that cannot be taught, only earned through actually walking through fire and choosing every single time to keep walking. That is not a small accomplishment. That is transformation, and it deserves to be recognized rather than taken for granted. Type 1111 if you feel this shift happening in you right now. There is a kind of quiet resistance that shows up in seasons of growth. Just as something in you begins to rise, something around you seems to resist it. Small conflicts appear from nowhere. Doubt returns exactly when you are finally starting to believe again. Old fears resurface with a strength you thought you had already overcome. This is not a sign that you are moving backward. It is often a sign that you are close enough to your breakthrough for it to be noticed. Resistance rarely shows up for people who are standing still. It shows up for people who are finally moving forward. You do not have to understand every part of this season to trust it. You do not have to see the full staircase to take the next step. Most people wait for certainty before they move, and certainty rarely arrives before the moment requires courage instead. Faith has never been about seeing everything clearly. It has always been about trusting the next small step, even when the rest of the path remains hidden in shadow. Like this video if you needed to hear that today. Think about the people who came before you. The ones who never got to see the fruit of what they planted, but planted anyway. Somewhere in your bloodline, someone prayed a prayer they did not live to see answered. Somewhere, someone believed for a future they would never personally witness. You may be standing right now inside the answer to a prayer someone else prayed long before you were born. That is not a small thing. That is generations of faith finally finding somewhere to land. If your family carried patterns of pain, cycles of silence, cycles of struggle, cycles that seemed to repeat no matter how hard anyone tried to break them, consider that you may be the one chosen to interrupt that pattern, not because you are perfect, not because you have it all figured out, but because someone in every bloodline has to be the one who finally says, "This ends with me." If that thought resonates with something deep inside you, it is not a coincidence. It is recognition of exactly what you were positioned to do. Type 777 if you feel called to break a cycle in your own life. You do not need the approval of everyone around you to walk in what you were called to do. In fact, some of the most important seasons of growth happen specifically when the people who once affirmed you fall silent, forcing you to lean on something steadier than human approval. That silence is uncomfortable. It can feel like abandonment, but it is often the exact condition required to build a faith strong enough to survive what is coming next. A faith that only exists because everyone was clapping is a fragile faith. A faith built in the quiet without applause is unshakable. Think about your own capacity for compassion, even after everything you have endured. Most people who go through what you have gone through become hardened, bitter, closed off to the world. But somewhere inside you, despite everything, there remains a softness, a willingness to care, a refusal to let pain turn you into someone cold. That is rare. That is not weakness. That is one of the strongest things a person can carry, because it means your pain refined you instead of poisoning you. Comment Amen if you refuse to let your pain make you bitter. This is your confirmation spoken plainly. Whatever you are waiting for right now, the answer, the breakthrough, the relationship, the healing, the shift you cannot yet see but can somehow feel, it has not been forgotten. Delay is not denial. A season that takes longer than you expected is not evidence that it will never come. Some of the most significant things in life require the longest preparation, precisely because they are too important to arrive before you are ready to carry them. You may feel, at times, like you are the only one who truly understands the weight of what you carry. In many ways, that may be true. No one else has lived exactly your story, felt exactly your pain, or carried exactly your calling. But feeling alone in your specific experience does not mean you are alone in your journey. There is a difference between isolation and abandonment. You may walk a path no one else has walked exactly like you, but that does not mean you walk it unaccompanied. Type 1111 one more time if you believe you are being watched over right now. Consider the timing of everything that has ever happened in your life, the good and the painful alike. Look back far enough, and you will notice a strange kind of precision to it. The person who left right before something better arrived. The opportunity that fell through right before a better one appeared. The heartbreak that at the time felt like the end of the world, but in hindsight, protected you from a future far more difficult than the one you eventually received. That precision is not luck. Luck does not consistently arrange itself with that much intention. There is a difference between a life that happens to you and a life that is being written through you. A life that merely happens to you is chaotic, disconnected, meaningless in its details. But a life being written through you carries a thread, a consistency, a shape, a slow unfolding of meaning that only becomes visible when you finally stop and look back instead of anxiously looking forward. If you look back at your own story right now, does it not somehow, despite everything, still make a strange kind of sense? That sense is not something you created, it is something you were given. Like this video, if your story is starting to make sense to you right now. Here is the truth beneath everything you have felt but could not always articulate. Your existence has never been small. Even in your quietest years, even in the seasons where you felt forgettable, something about the way you were made has always carried significance beyond what your circumstances reflected back to you. You have influenced people you do not even remember. You have shifted moods in rooms simply by walking into them. You have said things in passing that someone still thinks about years later. That kind of impact is not accidental. It is a signature. You do not need grand achievements to matter. You do not need recognition from a crowd to confirm what has already been true since before you can remember. Your value was never dependent on being noticed by everyone. It was only ever dependent on being exactly who you were built to be, even in the rooms where no one was paying attention. Type 222 if you're ready to stop shrinking yourself for other people's comfort. Think about the version of you that is still ahead, the one who has not been born into your life yet, but is being formed in you right now, in this exact season of struggle and stillness. That version of you will look back on this exact moment, this exact video, and recognize it as one of the quiet turning points. Not because anything dramatic happened, not because the sky opened and the answer arrived instantly, but because something in you decided in this ordinary moment to keep believing instead of giving up. Small decisions like that, repeated enough times, eventually become the entire shape of a transformed life. You are closer than you think, closer to the breakthrough, closer to the clarity, closer to the version of your life where all of this waiting finally makes sense. It rarely feels close in the moment because the final stretch of any long season is often the hardest, the most tempting to abandon. But the finish line does not announce itself in advance. It simply arrives quietly for those who kept walking even when they could not see it yet. Comment Amen if you refuse to give up now, this close to your breakthrough. So here, in this quiet moment, let this settle into your spirit. You were not created as an afterthought. You were not assembled from leftover pieces of someone else's story. Every difficult season, every isolating year, every moment you felt like the exception to every rule was shaping something too specific, too intentional, too rare to be labeled ordinary. You were made distinct on purpose because the world needed exactly one of you, and it could not have gotten that from anyone else. Carry this with you when this video ends and the noise of the world returns. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not being punished by delay. You are being prepared quietly and precisely for a season that requires exactly the person your struggles have shaped you into. Every tear had a purpose. Every silence had a reason. Every closed door made room for something your old life could never have held. Hold on a little longer. What has felt delayed was never denied. What has felt forgotten was never abandoned. You are chosen not because you are perfect, but because you are exactly, precisely, irreplaceably you. If this message spoke to you, stay a little longer. Subscribe to Chosen and Called, so the next confirmation finds you the moment you need it most.